Having leadership integrity means that as leaders, we are consistent and whole. If we have behavioral integrity, we do what we say we'll do. We align our words and our deeds. Author and lawyer Stephen Carter says that integrity is like the weather. Everybody talks about it, but nobody knows what to do about it. Integrity is that stuff that we say we want more of. We want our elected representatives to have it. Political challengers insist their opponents are lacking in it. We want it in our spouses, partners, children, and friends. We want it in our schools, our houses of worship. We want it in our corporations and the products they manufacture. So perhaps it might be more accurate to say that integrity is like good weather. Everybody seems to be in favor of it. The word integrity comes from the Latin integritas, which translates into wholeness, soundness, untouched, whole and entire. When we refer to a building's structural integrity, we are talking about the building and its ability to hold itself together under a load, including a load of its own weight, without collapsing. Personal integrity shares a fundamental quality with structural integrity. It cannot come and go. It has to be there whether people are looking or not. Otherwise, you risk calamity. Integrity also comes from the same Latin root as integer, which makes sense in that a person of integrity is like a whole number, a whole person, undivided. If you were to search the word integrity in dictionaries, you would find a definition that is something like the quality of being honest and having strong moral principles. Moral uprightness. He is known to be a man of integrity would be the sample. Or the state of being whole and undivided. For example, upholding to territorial integrity and national sovereignty. Wikipedia defines integrity as the practice of being honest and showing consistent, uncompromising adherence to strong moral and ethical principles and values. In ethics, integrity is regarded as the honesty and truthfulness or accuracy of one's actions. Thought leaders Peterson and Seligman define integrity in terms of a behavioral criteria. They have 3 points. A regular pattern of behavior that is consistent with espoused values, which means practicing what one preaches. A public justification of moral convictions, even if those convictions are not popular. And the treatment of others with care, as evident by helping those in need, a sensitivity, in other words, to the needs of others. It would seem that all of these are describing uprightness of character. I would ask you to pause here for a few moments, take out your notebook or journal, and think about how would you define integrity in your own words. Perhaps create your own definition. Next, would you be able to share examples of individuals with integrity? It would be nice to list those and share them when we chat about this in class. Take a few moments now to click on the link that will take you to a TED Talk by a young man by the name of Joe Sabini from the University of Nevada. I'd be curious about your thoughts, your reactions to his presentation. Dr. Christian Christensen from the University of Birmingham suggests that integrity, which is the darling of many contemporary virtue ethicists, does not really clearly appear in Aristotle's writings. He has written a fairly recent article that explores whether integrity is actually redundant in terms of Aristotelian virtue ethics. He claims that, in a sense, any role that it could reasonably be expected to play is already adequately covered by other virtues. The American thought leader Stephen Carter seems to agree with Christensen, as he notes that although its antecedents may be traced back to Aristotle, the basic concept of integrity was introduced in the Western tradition through the struggle of Christianity, as they tried to find a guide for the well-lived life. Carter, in fact, feels so strongly about integrity that he wrote an entire book about the topic. He offers a slightly different definition of integrity. The points that he really emphasizes are here on our slide. He talks about integrity as about discerning what is right and what is wrong, but then acting on what you've discerned, even if there's a personal cost, and saying openly that you're acting on your understanding of right or wrong. Now, the first criterion about discerning what is right and wrong suggests that integrity requires a degree of moral reflection. The second point about acting on what you've discerned brings in the idea that an integral person is steadfast. He or she has a sense of keeping commitments. And then finally, saying openly that you're acting on your understanding, that part of his definition reminds us that a person of true integrity is unashamed to do the right thing. In his book, Carter concludes that a person of integrity demonstrates a certain serenity, confident in the knowledge that he or she is living rightly. Stephen Carter optimistically suggests that a person of integrity lurks somewhere inside each of us. A person we can trust to do the right thing, to play by the rules, to keep commitments. He posits that since we all sense the capacity for integrity within ourselves, we are generally able to notice and admire integrity, even in people with whom we may, on some issues, sharply disagree. Carter suggests perhaps integrity ranks first among those that make for a good leader's character. In a sense, it must come prior to everything else. The rest matters very little if the leader lacks integrity, the courage of his convictions, or the willingness to act and speak on behalf of what he or she knows is right. Carter asks, no matter what our politics, no matter what causes we may support, would anyone really want to be led or followed by a person who lacks integrity? There is rather one infamous corruption scandal that I think perhaps demonstrates a significant lack of integrity. As the most popular sport in the world, association football, which is known as soccer in the United States, includes over 250 million players in over 200 countries and literally billions of fans. That particular sport culminates every 4 years in an event that's known as the World Cup, which is actually watched by more people than the Olympics. And this huge event is organized by the Fédération Internationale de Football Association, otherwise known as FIFA. In 2015, there were a series of arrests of 14 FIFA officials. They were charged with taking over $200 million in bribes, fraud, racketeering, and money laundering. The criminal investigation delved into such questions as, were their votes bought and sold to award the 2010 World Cup to South Africa? How were the 2018 and 2022 World Cups awarded to Russia and Qatar? And did officials get kickbacks from sports advertisers? FIFA did have a code of ethics. Now, ideally, organizational codes are designed to guide behavior, but codes are not necessarily enough to inspire integrity. Tony Simos of the Cornell College of Business and author of the book The Integrity Dividend argues, a statement of values that lives in a desk drawer does more ill than good. The bottom line here is that FIFA officials and others involved in this huge scandal lacked integrity. They prompted out a code of ethics for players, but they didn't follow a similar code themselves. If you want to be successful over the long haul, you have to have a sense of purpose that is clearly articulated and embedded throughout an organization and all processes. But you have to live it. There cannot be two sets of rules. The U.S. Attorney General, who helped to investigate the FIFA case, spoke about the impact on children who had put their trust into this organization. He said, and I quote, "When you're talking about sports, that's how we teach our kids about fair play and sportsmanship. We want them to look up to these sports figures. It's character building as an exercise for them to play sports. The FIFA case, however, kills ideals in young people, in people who look up to their figures and place their trust in such organizations." The research of Dr. Mary Crossan, Dr. Gerard Seijts, and Jeffrey Gandz has identified 5 character elements that are illustrative of integrity. They suggest that when you possess integrity, you are authentic, candid, transparent, principled, and consistent. For example, if you're authentic, you make decisions and take actions that are true to your personal values and beliefs. People see your actions as sincere and genuine. If you are candid, you strive to be truthful and straightforward with yourself and with others. You remain forthright even in difficult situations without becoming mean-spirited. And candor is really essential to living long-term success as a leader. If you're transparent, you remain open and honest in your relationships and communications. You allow others to see what you truly value, believe, know, and intend, including those things that you're struggling with. If you're principled, you demonstrate high personal and professional standards. And in terms of consistent, it's simply you practice what you preach. You walk that talk across situations, including both good and challenging times, and over the long haul. I would ask you here again to pause, pull out your journal or notebook, do a little self-check. Do you really walk the talk? Are you authentic, candid, transparent, principled, and consistent? Are your school leaders authentic, candid, transparent, principled, and consistent? I would ask you here again to pause, pull out your journal or notebook, do a little self-check. Do you really walk the talk? Are you authentic, candid, transparent, principled, and consistent? Are your school leaders authentic, candid, transparent, principled, and consistent? Many people use the words ethics and integrity interchangeably. However, using those words as if they mean more or less the same thing washes out some very important and useful distinctions. According to Dr. Crossan and her colleagues, ethics is a set of guidelines for right and wrong, and thus provides a roadmap for decision-making and action. But it is important to note that what is considered ethical can vary from person to person and group to group. If a group has a well-developed ethical framework, it will help them find that moral line that guides decision-making. However, there are times that groups may choose to step over that line, and when they do so, they are acting in ways that are inconsistent with their ethical codes, whether those are internal or public. And in those instances, they are actually lacking in integrity. Integrity involves building trust and maintaining transparency. Trust in an organization is cultivated over time through a leader's willingness to be vulnerable as well as transparent. Researcher Paul Zak applied neuroscience to people and organization. As employees worked, Zak measured the oxytocin in the brain and found that people are happier on the job when they are doing purpose-driven work with people they trust. His study found that people working in high-trust environments had 74% less stress, 106% more energy, 50% higher productivity, 13% fewer sick days, 76% more engagement, 29% more satisfaction with their lives, and 40% less burnout. He concluded that trust eases social interaction so that we can do more in relationship with each other. When we offer our trust in others, we are willing to be vulnerable, and we are particularly vulnerable in times of change, when we are living with uncertainty. Much more is at stake. Research indicates that one way people manage uncertainty is by judging a leader's action as fair or unfair, which puts pressure on leaders, particularly in difficult times of change. As leaders, we need to approach relationships with our eyes wide open. We take calculated risks, but we know that trust is not a guarantee. We choose to trust and engage others in good faith in order to have better relationships, and trust is reciprocal. If we model trust, then we're more likely to receive it in return. Trust does change over time, and depending on the players and the circumstances, it may be slow to grow. John Gottman, who studies trust and relationships, found that feelings of trust are actually built in small ways, not necessarily by big events. However, on the other hand, big events can quickly destroy trust. He encourages leaders to look for ways to connect in positive ways. He suggests choosing small emotional connections, keeping promises and commitments, to cultivate trust. Transparency typically includes disclosure, accuracy, and clarity, all the things we expect from those who lead with integrity. Leaders can openly share information, for instance, but if that information is inaccurate or unclear, it won't bode well for how people perceive the integrity of the leader. Part of being transparent deals with making public statements. Researchers seem to agree that integrity involves keeping promises, and public statements can be useful for leadership integrity. People are more likely to follow through on commitments if those commitments are made in a public setting. So this is a little assessment that I'd like you to engage in. Think of a school leader that you respect and you admire. Now, keeping that person's behavioral integrity in mind, think about this and score it on this scale. 1 being you strongly disagree, and 5 that you strongly agree. Perhaps jot this in your journal. Now, once you've done this for this school leader that you respect and admire, please jot down your thoughts about how working with this leader made you feel and think about why. After a few moments, I would like to ask you to think of a school leader now that really has not gained your respect or admiration, and score that leader on this same scale. 1, strongly disagree, to 5, strongly agree. Once you've completed that task, again, jot down your thoughts about how working with this leader made you feel, and perhaps offer some evidence as to why. Interestingly, people with high levels of integrity tend to reveal other dimensions of their character. But when integrity is lacking, it becomes difficult to be truly collaborative. A lack of integrity can threaten temperance and compassion. And integrity is a major underpinning element of accountability. It also helps to inform justice. A question to consider, I suppose, is, can integrity stand alone? I would posit that it cannot live alone. A character-filled life cannot be lived on the strength of integrity alone. For instance, without humanity and collaboration, integrity becomes dogmatic and rigid. There's a subtle but more important difference between being right and self-righteous. Trying to be right is a noble stance, but self-righteousness, well, it just becomes annoying. Courage is also critical to exercising integrity. It takes courage to say things that people may not want to hear or expect to hear. Accountability requires that you need to be prepared to live with the consequences that can arise from acting with integrity. Thus, I don't think integrity can stand on its own. As you reflect on things we've talked about so far, please take out your journal again and answer the questions on the screen. When you see wrongdoing in your school, do you challenge it or ignore it? Do you sometimes veer towards being self-righteous when dealing with wrongdoings? Are there ways in which you could minimize this tendency to veer into self-righteousness while still speaking up and speaking out? I look forward to hearing your thoughts in class. So now it's your turn. Turn your thinking inward. Reflect and score yourself on this integrity-related scale. Again, 1, strongly disagree, to 5, strongly agree. Jot your scores into your journal. The link on this page will take you to a TED Talk London, and the speaker is Trudy West. This was an independent event, but it's interesting. I think we have to watch this particular TED Talk and think about, as leaders, how does working with integrity lead to hypocrisy? Trudy West discusses her research and shows that despite strong beliefs and values, we can act in ways that look or feel hypocritical, particularly when we're working under pressure. From her own research and personal inquiry and the experience of working with leaders across the world, Trudy shares in this TED Talk how we judge others, justify ourselves, and even more painfully judge ourselves. Her findings have important implications for leaders who want to work and develop with integrity, especially under pressure. So now that you have experienced some thinking and some other people's thinking about integrity, I would like you to return to your notebook, your journal, and jot down your reflections on integrity and what it means for you and what you need to be aware of as you move into future leadership roles.